As I said, I've been around to a number of churches since I've been here last, and when I was here last, I was trying to convince you, hopefully you remember, maybe not, about the mark of a church. What is it that should identify us as a church, as a group of believers, as Christians? And I proposed that it was, oh dear, love, thank you. Whew. It has been over a month. Love, the mark of a Christian should be love. In John chapter 13, Jesus says, a new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another as I have loved you. By this all will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. The mark of a congregation should be that we love one another. Jesus goes on in Mark chapter 12, when he's asked what's the most important commandment, he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. So we love each other, we love our neighbor, and then as we just read, we're also to love our enemy. But how do we love? What does love look like? And last time I was here, we looked at the life of Joseph, because he demonstrated love that suffered long. And I'll be here again, I think in a month or so, and again in January. And what I'm doing is we're going to go through 1 Corinthians 13, where it says love is patient, love is kind, love does not parade itself, is not puffed up, does not envy. I think I've already said that. And looking at how do we demonstrate this love that should be the mark of a believer in Christ? How do we love each other, our neighbors, and our enemies? So we looked at how Joseph endured hardship from his brothers. And I want to look at the second one. Love is kind. Love is kind. And again, looking at someone who's a good example for us. We can talk all theory and so on, but I always find that stories, putting ourselves in the shoes of someone else and saying, hey, look at the circumstances they were in, and if I was in that situation, how would I respond? What did they do? And so story helps us to determine how we should behave. Love is kind. But to decide who to study, I was thinking, what is kindness? Well, kindness is an action. It's not just something that you kind of believe. In James talks about how our faith should have works. I'll demonstrate my faith by my works. Faith without works is dead. And I would say, and I don't think I'm heretical by saying this, but love without works is dead. I can say to my wife, I love you all the time, but if I treat her poorly and don't demonstrate it, do I love her? No, I don't. Love is an action. And so I wanted to find someone in the scriptures that could be an example for us of a love that acts, a love that does something for someone. And the best example I could find was Ruth. So if you have a Bible, please turn to the book of Ruth. We're going to read a fairly lengthy passage. I'm going to try to give you some background. We'll unpack it a bit and then look at how we can behave as believers in Jesus Christ. What do we do to show kindness to each other, to our neighbors, and to our enemies that demonstrates love, which is to be the mark of our faith? So reading right at the beginning there, Ruth chapter 1, I'm going to read the first 17 verses. Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, the name of his wife was Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion, Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah, and they went to the country of Moab and remained there. Then Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left and her 2 sons. And they took wives of the women of Moab. The name of the one was Orpah, the name of the other Ruth, and they dwelt there about 10 years. Then both Mahlon and Chilion died. So the woman survived her 2 sons and her husband. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law that she might return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab that the Lord had visited his people in giving them bread. Therefore she went out from the place where she was, and her 2 daughters-in-law with her. And they went on their way to return to the land of Judah. And Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, go, return to your mother's house, and the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find rest, each in the house of her husband. Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. And they said to her, surely we will return with you to your people. But Naomi said, turn back, my daughters. Why would you go with me? Are there still sons in my womb that they may be your husbands? Turn back, my daughters. Go your way, for I'm too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, Even if I should have a husband tonight and bear also sons, would you wait for them till they were grown? Would you restrain yourselves from having husbands? No, my daughters, for it grieves me very much for your sakes that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. Then they lifted up their voices and wept again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law. But Ruth clung to her. And she said, look, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. But Ruth said, entreat me not to leave you, or to turn back from following after you. For wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts you and me. Kindness takes action. Orpah cried and said she loved her mother-in-law. She went home. Ruth clung to her, it says, and went back with her to Israel. Now, in reading this, we may miss some of the heaviness. It sounds great. She's going to go back with her. They're going to live happily ever after. No. Let me give you some background. Ruth was a Moabitess. The Moabs were the descendants of Lot, Abraham's nephew. And you'd think that that would be a good thing, all family and so on, but not really. When the Israelites left Egypt on their way to the promised land, the Moabites hired a guy by the name of Balaam to curse them. Several times they tried to, look over here and curse them there. Oh, it didn't work because God kept on blessing Israel. And Balaam kept on pronouncing these blessings because he couldn't curse them. But the Moabites wanted to curse them. They didn't want them around. They wanted harm to come to them. But what ended up happening, and you can read this in Deuteronomy 23, is God actually reverses it and puts a curse on the people of Moab and says that no Moabite can enter the congregation, the tabernacle worship, down to the 10th generation. They're not welcome here. They tried to curse you. They're bad. We don't want them. God declared no Moabites in the congregation of Israel. So Ruth, as a Moabite, is going into an area where she is literally not welcome. It even got worse. Even though God declared this curse, the people of Israel, can we use the word racist, against the Moabites. They hated them. They didn't want them around. And Ruth is choosing to go to an area where she's not welcome. A little more context of what Ruth has decided to do in her kindness. In the ancient Near East and in Israel, women could not own property. In fact, women were owned property by their father until they were married to their husband, and they relied on the husband or the father for their security. So Naomi was going back to an area where she wasn't going to be able to move back into her old house where Elimelech lived, or back on the farm and have goods. That land was taken over by somebody else, and she had no rights. And so Ruth is not only going back to a place where nobody wants her there, she's going back to a place where there is no home, security, food, or anything. They're going to be squatters. They're doing, just how are they going to survive? You're starting to see this is a big decision. This is why Orpah went home. And a little more just to explain the really weird comment that Naomi makes about if she had sons today, would you wait for them to have a husband? That kind of sounds really, well, let's just say creepy. It just doesn't sound right. But here's the reason why. Women couldn't own property, so God put a proviso in the law, and you can read about it in Deuteronomy chapter 25, that says if a man dies without having a son, it is a requirement of the law that his brother or closest relative marries the widow to have a son that would carry on his name, the dead man's name. He wouldn't be an heir or have the inheritance of the other brother, but it would carry on the other man's name so that then the wife, daughters would have security, have land, have a place to live. So this is why this little comment there about having a new husband, someone to provide. A little bit of foreshadowing here if you know the story of Ruth. So there's the context. This is no small decision that Ruth has made. This is a big deal for her to go to a country where she's not welcome, to a place where there is no hope, no money, no security, no nothing. Kindness. She could have gone home like Orpah to where she had comfort, security, family. But she decides to be kind. Let's jump ahead to Ruth chapter 2. Naomi and Ruth have arrived back into the Bethlehem area, and let's just pick up the story. Naomi had a kinsman of her husband, a man of great wealth of the family of Elimelech. His name was Boaz. So Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, please let me go to the field and glean heads of grain after him in whose sight I may find favor. And she said to her, go, my daughter. Then she left and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech. A little more Old Testament context. Leviticus chapter 19, there's some rules about harvesting and what's going on here. So in Leviticus 19, God says to anyone who owns land, when you harvest your fields, you're not allowed to go to the far corners. You've got to leave them unharvested, and you're not allowed to go back over a second time. So anything that's missed, any grain, any grapes, anything that's left, you can't go back over a second time. Why? Because God had in his mind to provide for people like Naomi, who didn't have land, for the poor, the widow, the orphan. And so God, this is his way of demonstrating kindness, so they can go in. But gleaning is back-breaking work, just so you can imagine. So you get a big field, and it's wheat harvest, and little bits of grain are falling as the harvesters are gathering it all up in sheaves and binding it, and so stuff gets dropped. So Ruth is walking around all day. I've already pulled a hamstring. Pulled it all day, just trying to find enough food to make a loaf. This is no small act of kindness. This isn't just going to the grocery store. This isn't just grabbing stuff. This is bent over, perhaps crawling along the ground, grabbing everything that she can to provide a little bit of food for Naomi. Let's continue reading. Boaz came from Bethlehem and said to the reapers, the Lord be with you. And they answered him, the Lord bless you. Then Boaz said to his servant who was in charge of the reapers, whose young woman is this? So the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered and said, that's the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. And she said, please let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves. So she came and has continued from morning until now, though she did rest a little in the house. Then Boaz said to Ruth, you will listen, my daughter, will you not? Do not go to glean in any other field, nor go from here, but stay close to my young women. Let your eyes be on the field which they reap, and go after them. Have I not commanded the young men not to touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink from what the young men have drawn. She fell on her face, bowed down to the ground, and said to him, why have I found favor in your eyes, that you should take notice of me, since I'm a foreigner? Boaz answered, it's been fully reported to me, all that you have done for your mother-in-law, since the death of your husband, and how you have left your father and mother and the land of your birth, and have come to a people of whom you did not know. So may the Lord repay you your work, and a full reward be given to you by the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge. Back-breaking work, hour after hour, perhaps from sunrise to sundown, she's gathering enough food. But Boaz says something here, and I don't want it to miss our attention. He says, stay in my field, stay close to my servant girls. Have I not commanded the young men not to touch you? Ruth 1:1, it says, now in the days when the judges ruled. Ever read Judges? Yes, you've read Judges. You know exactly what I'm getting at. It was awful during the time of Judges. Read the last couple chapters of Judges where they're like, never mind, I don't want to even verbalize it, but they're chopping up a woman and sending her to the party. Like, it's awful, terrible. It says in Judges that people did whatever they wanted to do, whatever they thought was good in their own eyes, and it was terrible. Some translations in the English translate this word touch as molest. Ruth was putting herself in danger of abuse, physical harm, and I don't even want to say the other words in church. This is the level of kindness that she has, that she is risking her life for Naomi. Boaz sees it, says, I'm going to give you protection here in my field. Don't go somewhere else. It is a nasty place to be right now in this time of the judges. So Ruth gleans all day, comes home. I'm going to skip over just for time's sake a bit. But when she comes home, she actually is given some lunch. She saves most of it to give it to Naomi, presents all the food to Naomi, and basically, out of respect and honor of her elder, she presents it and lets Naomi decide what to do with it. Now, I don't know in the dynamic in your home, if you're married and if you have like two incomes, or if you're a one-income family or so on, but who gets to decide on final decisions of how to spend money and how to do things? Isn't it always the person that kind of earns, they kind of yeah, I appreciate the kind of, yeah, you guys get what I'm getting at here. Ruth had a chance here to kind of lord it over Naomi. She's done all the work. She's got all the grain, so we're going to do things my way. She defers to Naomi as the elder, as her mother-in-law. She serves her, presents the food to her out of kindness, out of love. When Naomi finds out where Ruth has been all day, whose field she was in, she realizes that Boaz is a relative of Elimelech, her husband. And as I mentioned before, there's this law that God had put into the law, that a brother, a cousin, a kinsman would marry a widow so that she could then have a son in the name of the deceased, so that they would have land and security. So Naomi knows this and starts to hatch a plan. She says, you know what, I'll tell you. Tonight, go back and present yourself to Boaz to see if he will take you, if he will redeem you, be a kinsman redeemer. So let's pick up the story in chapter 3. Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, my daughter, shall I not seek security for you, that it may be well with you? Now Boaz, whose young women you were with, is he not our kinsman? In fact, he's winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Therefore, wash yourself, anoint yourself, put on your best garment, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he's finished eating and drinking. Then it shall be when he lies down that you shall notice the place where he lies. You shall go in, uncover his feet, and lie down. Then he will tell you what you should do. And she said, I will do all that you say. So Ruth went down to the threshing floor and did according to all that her mother-in-law instructed her. After Boaz had eaten and drunk and his heart was cheerful, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. And she came softly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. And it happened at midnight that the man was startled, turned himself, and there a woman was lying at his feet. He said, who are you? She said, I'm Ruth, your maidservant. Take your maidservant under your wing, for you are a near kinsman. And he said, blessed are you of the Lord, my daughter, for you have shown more kindness at the end than at the beginning, and that you did not go after young men, whether rich or poor. Now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you request. For all the people of my town know that you are a virtuous woman. Now, it's true, I am your near kinsman. However, there is a kinsman nearer than I. So stay this night, and in the morning it shall be that if he will perform the duty of a near kinsman for you, good, let him do it. But if he does not want to perform the duty for you, then I will perform the duty for you. As the Lord lives, lie down till morning. I've been trying to give you lots of context, kind of the behind the scenes, things that kind of Ruth skips over, or the story of Ruth skips over. I have no idea what the uncovering of the feet and lying at the feet is. This is nowhere else in the Bible. There's no explanation of it. A lot of commentaries have all sorts of speculation on what is going on here, but basically Ruth is throwing herself at Boaz's feet, saying, I am here to be your wife if you will take me. And Boaz, knowing the law, knowing the situation that Naomi and Ruth are in, knowing that he is a relative of Elimelech and that it is his duty to marry her, says, I will do this, but there is someone closer that should be doing this first, to marry you, to have a son in the name of your late husband, Mahlon, to carry on the line of Elimelech. But he notice something here, and this is where I want to just pause for a second, because our interpretation or our view of the word love is very different than what Jesus was talking about when he said, love your neighbor as yourself. Love each other. Love your enemy. When we think of the word love, and especially when we're reading a story like Ruth, we jump to the romance, right? Isn't this a great love story? In fact, in Ruth chapter 1, we have that passage that we read at all the weddings, right? Don't let me leave. Wherever you go, I will go. Where your lodge, your people. Have you ever heard that read anywhere else other than a wedding? It has nothing to do with romance. It's a young lady to her mother-in-law that's saying it, but we like to use it. It's a wonderful romantic sentiment. And when we think of love, we think of our spouses, or maybe if you're younger, that girl that you're dating and you get all warm feelings and shivers down your spine. That's what comes to your mind when we say love. But this is not what Jesus is telling us. This is not what Paul was talking about in 1 Corinthians 13. Love is patient, love is kind, love does not envy. It's not an emotional response. It is cold and calculated. It's a purposeful act of the will. Ruth, at the beginning of our story, is standing there with the choice to just go home to her family and start again. She's a young woman. Comfort, safety, security. Or to go to a land, self-sacrificing, choose to help someone else. I'm not sure of the ages of Naomi, but obviously she's not going to take a husband again, and perhaps she can't go and glean. It's just beyond her physical ability. Ruth chooses to show incredible kindness to Naomi, to glean for her, to provide food. And then Boaz recognizes, he says, now the choice that you're making, throwing yourself at my feet to be a wife, is even kinder than what you did with leaving your home and gleaning, risking your safety again. To go after a younger man, to have the romantic love, to live happily ever after. We don't know how much older Boaz is, but he keeps calling her daughter. Chances are Boaz, with all of his land and all these servants, he's probably already married with a family and kids. There's not going to be a romantic relationship here. We don't want to put this into our cultural context and think, oh, what a nice love story. No. Everyone here is acting out of duty, purposefully choosing to show kindness. Ruth goes home and lets Naomi know the good news. And the next morning, let's pick up our story in chapter 4. Now Boaz went up to the gate and sat down there, and behold, the near kinsman of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, come aside, friend, sit down here. So he came inside and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city, and he said, sit down over here. So they sat down. Then he said to the near kinsman, Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, sold the piece of land which belonged to our brother Elimelech. Now, sold is not exactly the right word. When Elimelech died, she had no rights to it. Somebody else is on this land. Someone else is taking control of it. Verse 4, and I thought to inform you, saying, buy it back in the presence of the inhabitants and the elders of my people, and if you will not redeem it, if you will redeem it, then redeem it. But if you will not, then tell me that I may know, because I'm the next one in line after you, and there's no one else to redeem it. So this man says, I'll redeem it. Then Boaz said, now on the day that you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you must also buy it from Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of the dead, to raise up the name of the dead as his inheritance. And the near kinsman said, oh, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I ruin my own inheritance. You redeem my right of redemption for yourself, for I cannot redeem it. Now it was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging to confirm anything. One man took off his sandal and gave it to the other, and this was an attestation in Israel. Therefore the near kinsman said to Boaz, you buy it for yourself. So he took off his sandal. And Boaz said to the elders of all the people, you are witnesses this day that I have bought all that was Elimelech's and all that was Chilion's and Mahlon's from the hand of Naomi. Now, wouldn't you love to buy a big piece of property for a sandal? No further commentary on the cost of housing. So you can see this wasn't a purchase, a sell, and a buy. This was a transfer of ownership. When Elimelech died, when his family left, somebody else would have been farming that land, and when Naomi came back, she could not claim rights to it. She had no right to the land, being a woman. Interestingly, this man, when he finds out that he could get this large tract of land, we're assuming, where he could farm on it and make more money, he thinks, excellent, I will redeem it. I'll take it. It's going to cost me a sandal. But then he finds out that he has to take a Moabitess as a wife and raise up a son that would not be his heir, that would then inherit all of this property outside of his. And what is his response? Oh, I can't take it. And he makes up this very lame excuse about then it might ruin my inheritance. No, it won't. This is someone who is not kind, who is selfish, who's looking out for themselves, who doesn't want to get involved, doesn't want to muddy the waters, doesn't want to work out of duty, out of love, out of kindness, even though it's all actually codified in God's law that this is what they're supposed to do to take care of each other. He rejects it. No, I'm not going to get involved with Ruth. I don't want anything to do with her. I thought I'd be able to get some land, a quick land grab and be richer, but no, it's not going to go to me. It's going to belong to them and be part of Elimelech's inheritance and his possessions and his descendants. Boaz gives over his sandal, acquires the land. For now, Naomi and Ruth have a place to live. There's a farm there that will have crops that they can now eat. Now they have security because of kindness again. Kindness. Boaz was willing to be kind, to get involved, get his hands dirty. A little complicated now, I'm sure, in his family life. But if you know the story of Ruth and Boaz, they have a son named Obed, who has a son named Jesse, who has a son named David, who eventually has a descendant named Jesus. Because of kindness, because Ruth was willing to sacrifice her own comfort, safety, security, to love someone actively, purposefully. Because Boaz was willing to be kind to someone, a refugee, someone they didn't want around, to show her kindness, to take care of her, and then get involved and perform his duty as a kinsman redeemer. Kindness. It's not a romance story. Now, when you read this, you're probably like, I'd spend some time on that context because oftentimes we don't read Leviticus and Deuteronomy and learn all those laws about inheritance and marrying your dead brother's wife and all that kind of stuff. It's all kind of muddy and so on. So it may seem a little foreign to us. It may that is another story for another time that doesn't apply to me. But again, we're looking at story and we're trying to find how do we put ourselves in their sandals? How would I react? Now, you're probably not going to get faced with having to move to another country to care for your mother-in-law, but you're going to be faced, even this week, with a situation where you can choose to stay at home and not get involved, or you can get involved in the muddy, messy problems of somebody else's life that needs love. I have two sons with me here. This time, it's Thanksgiving, so my one son is home from school. You met Tobias, I think, the last time I was here. But my wife is never here with me because she works at our church downtown Hamilton. And we have an outreach to the urban poor and to the refugees. And I often resent that on Saturdays we're delivering mattresses and pots and pans to refugees who are 4 or 5 people in a one-room apartment trying to just get out of problems in DR Congo or Cameroon. They've come to Canada for help, for security. And this is part of what she does, not only because that's her job, but this is because she is kind and loving. And we end up driving places and helping people. And I'm like, I just want to go home and take my Saturday off. I often find myself not being kind. And yet the Bible tells me clearly that the identifying mark of a Christian is love. And part of love is being kind. So that's probably more relatable, I think, my story than Ruth and Boaz's. I don't want to help anybody today. Maybe you might risk some safety. Maybe you're called to help somebody maybe that you don't trust. Ruth went to an area and really risked her life to serve somebody else. Maybe you'll be called to that. It's this idea of a Christian duty that we serve, that we're kind. You can choose pleasure, comfort, safety, or you can choose kindness and love. It's a choice. Love is a choice. Love takes effort. It's going to cause you some blood and sweat and tears to show kindness, some self-sacrifice. There's always this promise of blessing, though, when we are kind. We have this wonderful story of what happens in the family of Boaz and Ruth because she acted out in kindness. And because of that relationship, because of everyone serving each other and being kind, we have the lineage of Jesus Christ. I want to challenge you to show a love that is kind. I remember my first Sunday here, you were announcing some bursaries. That's kindness. Giving of your money to somebody else so they can go to college. That's kindness. I want to honor you in that and say, where else can you do it? Look at each other. Remember, John chapter 13, all men will know you are my disciples if you love one another. So start here. Start here. How can I show kindness? How can I show love to somebody in my church? Who needs a little bit of help? Who needs me to do some heavy lifting for them? And look across the fence in your yard and say, all right, which one of my neighbors needs a little kindness, needs a little love? And here's the hardest one. What about my enemy? The passage you read at the beginning in Matthew 5. Part of my wife's work is dealing again with those that are living rough, I think is the term we're using now. They are abusing drugs. They have a lot of difficulties, and as she tries to help them with clothes or food, she often finds them they sell the clothes to buy drugs. And the question is, should I keep on doing this? You know what the Matthew 5 passage teaches us? Yeah. They ask you to go 1 mile, you go the second mile. You keep loving. You keep showing kindness. That's what we're called to do. And that's the mark of a church.